The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
It's Cousins keeping it and running in for a touchdown.
Are you kidding me? And there's that celebration. What is that celebration?
Good morning, Vikings fans. It's a Victory Monday, you might say, on the Zone Coverage Football Machine, the Reaction Podcast, with me, Sam Ekstrom, Andy Carlson, Arif Hassan, Luke Inman. They're back every Wednesday night. I'm just filling in for my 2 cents on the day after the game. I cover the Vikings for ZoneCoverage.com. Follow me on Twitter at Sam Ekstrom. Subscribe at ZoneCoverage.com for a minuscule $19.99 per year. Just use the promo code Ekstrom. EKSTROM. Vikings victorious. They've won 2 in a row. They're 3-2-1. And they are percentage points behind the Chicago Bears for the lead in the NFC North in an increasingly level NFC. And that Vikings-Saints game 2 weeks from now is looming very largely. But Minnesota wins somewhat handily. Chicago, with a choke job against Brock Osweiler in Miami, they miss a game-winning field goal in OT. Dolphins kick a game-winning field goal in OT. And just like that, order has, I think, a little bit been restored in Vikings country. Now, for 2 weeks in a row, they've looked like their vintage selves in Philadelphia. A well-rounded performance, especially by the defense. Yesterday, defense very much looking like its old self, harassing Josh Rosen on third down. And it all started with another Kirk Cousins pregame speech.
I'm back! Hey, I got a question for you. How did you feel after last week's victory, man? Great, right? That's because it was earned, man. Nothing in this league is free. Nothing's a gift. You can't just roll your helmet out there and play. You got to go out there every play and earn it. And you got to take it, man. You got to take defense. I've been a rookie quarterback before. You can suffocate him. You can suffocate him. Make him miserable all game long. Get us the ball back.
Make him miserable, they did. Suffocate him, they did. The Cardinals are woeful on offense. They have not been over 300 yards all year. And Kirk Cousins has thrown for 300 yards, I want to say 3 times. Cardinals had 5 3-and-outs. They only scored 10 points on offense, and 7 of those came once it got out of hand, and the Vikings laxed a bit on defense, as they tend to do, which I'm sure a lot of people aren't big fans of, me included, especially when it's still in the third quarter. But run defense, stout, 3 yards per carry allowed on the ground, 2 straight weeks of great rush defense. Big plays reduced, especially after the couple early in the game. They had the 35-yarder to Kirk, which the Cardinals turned into the first points of the game on a field goal. And they had the 40-yarder to Ricky Seals-Jones, who, by the way, has one of the worst catch percentages in the league compared to targets. But he made a great play. Cardinals came away with nothing on that drive. They go for it, 4th and goal at the 1. And so they really capitalized just 3 points after those 2 massive throws by Rosen to get into the red zone. So that's a win. That's a win for the Vikings defense altogether. And it was that third down play call that I think the Cardinals would be questioning, the play action pass to the right corner. And Rosen was very complimentary to the Vikings after the game. He said it's a very complex defense. They've been together so long that they communicate well. And it's impressive the way they were able to communicate on that third down. They had Ben Gideon and Anthony Harris draped all over the receiver in the corner. That play had no chance, and then they ran it on 4th down. You run it twice there, you probably have a better shot of getting in or try to get to the edge somehow. But rushing up the gut against Minnesota in short yardage has never been successful. And teams persist in trying it. But that was an underrated big play in the game. That early hold, especially when you look at what happened after. You know, it was 10-3 at the time. Vikings stopped the Cardinals inside the 5. Cardinals tie the game on the defensive touchdown. The Cousins fumble leads to 7 for Arizona, 10-10. If the Cardinals just put up points there, then it might be a different ballgame. But here are the third down numbers for Arizona. 0 for 10. Rosen sacked twice. Threw an interception on 3rd and 6 to Anthony Harris, who played very well, special teams and defensively. Cardinals averaged 3rd and 7.5. Long conversions all day. And when Rosen tried to throw on 3rd down, bad things happened. 1 for 7. -2 yards and the aforementioned pick. So, vintage day for the Vikings defense. They win at 27-17. Mike Hughes, however, likely has an ACL tear. And that's some nasty news for the Vikings' second consecutive year. It appears that their first selection in the draft is going to miss most of the season with a knee injury. And I've got a big feature coming out about ACL rehabs and how it relates to Mike Hughes that's coming out probably Monday, maybe Tuesday at the latest. But it talks about the resources that the Vikings have at their new facility, what other teammates have gone through in their respective rehabs, and what Hughes can expect going forward. He is having an MRI today. The fear is that it's an ACL, and you hold out hope that it's not. But if it is, he's got about 10.5 months until the next regular season starts. 9 months sets him up for training camp. As we saw, Dalvin Cook had a phenomenal rehab. But every ACL can be different. Varying levels of ligament damage, structural damage, and you lose some key depth there if you lose Hughes, not only on defense, but on special teams as well. And Holton Hill, I think in both roles, may have to be the fill-in. Defensively, they're going to need to turn to Holton more often, and also in the return game, Holton Hill could be the go-to guy. Man, would they love to have Terrence Newman at least eligible to play. He's not eligible to play being a coach. It's against NFL rules. Terrence didn't seem to know that when we talked to him at his press conference following his retirement. He talked about how, it might be the shortest retirement in history if I have to come back, but he's not allowed to per NFL rules. So that's the defensive side of the ball. How about the offensive side?
It's Murray with a big hole, and he breaks it into a long one. Antoine Bethea takes him down at the 34-yard line. It's Murray. He breaks through. He fights off Antoine Bethea and goes in for a touchdown. First rushing touchdown of the season for the Minnesota Vikings.
Probably 3 big takeaways offensively yesterday. Number 1, run game established. You have to start somewhere, and you draw the worst rush defense in the NFL, and you take advantage, as you should. Confidence builder, for sure. Cardinals have been woeful against the run this year. 120 yards allowed in 4 of their 5 games coming in, and Vikings nearly cracked 200 on them yesterday using the big play. Latavius Murray, 4 runs over 20 yards. Mike Boone gets in there for 1 carry, takes it 20 yards, right up the middle. Love Mike Boone. Credit to the offensive line, because they were not good pass blocking yesterday, and they haven't been all year, but it really should not overshadow what they did in the run game yesterday. And there's no reason they can't do this on a regular basis. Remember, the Vikings have not been good in the ground game this year, but a lot of that's because of opportunity. They had the fewest rush attempts through 4 weeks in the NFL, and they weren't efficient in those runs. But when you're running it so rarely, so few times, then you're eliminating your chances of having that big 25-yarder, which the Vikings gave themselves enough opportunities on Sunday to bust out a handful of times. Latavius Murray with a pair of 20-plus yard runs on that first touchdown drive where he stiff-armed Antoine Bethea, got in the end zone. Vikings took the lead. He finished it off with a big run to clinch that game late. Had a huge 34-yarder in the middle. Murray looked explosive, career high, 155 yards for Tay-Train. And the Vikings' first rushing touchdown of the year in the first quarter. Brian O'Neill, solid at right tackle. He's making that case to be the full-timer. Frankly, I don't think Riley Reiff is going to be back next week. He's been absent at practice, and usually when guys are absent from practice, that is an indication that they're a little further away, maybe at a different step in their rehab. Riley Reiff has foot issues. I think we all know how chronic foot issues can be, especially when you're at the weight of an offensive lineman. He clearly was playing with some kind of malady against the Bills when he really struggled against Jerry Hughes. The foot has continued to be on the injury report, so he's been playing through something for about 3 games. It just became too much, and we may have to get used to Rashad Hill left, Brian O'Neill right. And the Vikings are saying, thank goodness we might have drafted a keeper here in Brian O'Neill, because if he wasn't ready, the Vikings would be hurting. They don't have much depth at tackle. Mike Remmers is definitely their backup plan there, but I think they'd like to get him used to playing guard. Kirk Cousins sacked 4 times yesterday. A key fumble leading to a touchdown, and it was his 4th straight game with a lost fumble. If you include that lateral pass against Philly, I think I put that more on Rock Thomas, but it was technically Cousins' fumble. Incidentally, you know who struggles even more with fumbles than Kirk Cousins? Carson Wentz. On pace to have more fumbles than Kirk Cousins through the same number of games. Just thought I'd toss that in there. But the fumbling is a problem, and it's got to stop. And the wild thing is, Kirk Cousins actually has as many turnovers this year as Case Keenum did last year for the Vikings. And Case Keenum this year already has more turnovers than he did for the Vikings last year. And Keenum is in a world of trouble in Denver. He might not be long for that job, as the Broncos, for a 2nd straight year, are squandering a 2-0 start, falling apart at the seams in Denver. But I think the Cousins issues are probably takeaway number 2 offensively for the Vikings, between the fumble bug biting again and a new one. Batted passes. 6 batted passes yesterday. One of them caught by Cousins, which I guess doesn't technically count as a batted pass because it was completed. But Cousins now leads the NFL in batted passes. And I don't know if this is a particularly accurate parallel, but I remember watching the Gophers game on Saturday, Gophers Ohio State, and Zach Annexstad was getting his passes batted too, and PJ Fleck on the sideline was gesturing to Annexstad, pointing to his eyes and saying, vision, eyes, be watching the field, be aware, be cognizant. There's no reason for 6 passes to get batted, especially when the quarterback's not under pressure. And Zimmer absolutely said that has to be cleaned up. Cousins finished 24 of 34, 233, 1 pick, 1 fumble, 4 sacks, 1 touchdown pass, and a touchdown run. So an up and down day for Cousins, but as I wrote yesterday at zonecoverage.com, the pregame speech, the dead arm dance in the end zone, some sort of hybrid between the Bernie and the floss. It's nice to have the leadership that Cousins brings when, number one, he chose to come to Minnesota. He was already an established veteran at the time. His role was clear. His investment in the organization was clear. If you look at the predecessors to Cousins in the quarterback seat, you had Teddy Bridgewater, who certainly had stake in the Vikings, but he hadn't really found his voice yet. It was that 3rd year when he tore up the knee. He was just discovering his identity. And then his Vikings career came to an end pretty quickly. Sam Bradford, quiet by nature, didn't come to Minnesota by choice. His run only lasted about 15 games that one season. And then he got hurt. Case Keenum, he was a journeyman, constantly second-guessed, and he was only in there for about 14, 15 games. So that none of those quarterbacks necessarily had all the pieces together to have that vocal leadership, that get-on-my-back style, because either they came to Minnesota via trade, or they didn't have a voice yet, or they didn't have the credibility. Cousins has those things. And with the pregame speeches and the end zone dances, there's a level of buy-in that I think this team has to Cousins. Linval Joseph, who apparently is the pregame speech organizer. He gave Cousins the job before the Philly game and attribute it to whatever you want, but the Vikings won that game. And he said, Kirk, it's going to be you again next week. And he rallies the troops for a second straight week. They're 2-0 with Cousins doing pregame speeches. And he says after the game how he's actually a bit of a reluctant leader, but when he gets asked to do something, he'll do it. And I think you're seeing that willingness that he's not walking on eggshells anymore around this team. He knows this has to be his team. He has to own it. And I think he's doing that in a lot of ways. I think some people would like to hear him take more accountability for some of the fumbling issues. Sometimes he kind of skirts around that point. He threw a really bad interception yesterday that I don't think he mentioned taking any accountability for. So I think there's room for Cousins to grow in that regard, but I also think he's on the right track, and I think this team kind of believes in what he has to say. When you get $84 million, you're given a voice that people are going to listen to. And so far, I think he's using that voice to motivate this team. And big offensive takeaway number 3, Adam Thielen. Reports say is still a very good football player.
And the pass, a diving effort by Thielen is complete. Wow. Cousins waiting, throwing to the end zone to Thielen. Touchdown.
And I had a couple tweets yesterday, snarkily, and I apologize. But let's start spelling the name right, huh? And this is more to the Nationals probably than the locals. I before E. It's not Thielen. It's Adam Thielen. And he's got 6 straight 100-yard games. So let's just clarify the record here. Thielen is the first in the Super Bowl era to have 6 straight 100-yard games to start a year. He is not the first to ever do it. I believe Charlie Hennigan is the name. In 1961, also accomplished that feat. But Thielen is virtually going to have 1,000 yards at the bye week if he keeps this up. He will. If he continues the 100-yard stretch, he will have 1,000 yards at the bye week. And what did the Vikings do when they needed a big drive there to start the second half? They go to Thielen 4 times. And the 3rd and 13 play turned out to be the big one. Kirk Cousins told me after the game when I asked him, he said that's a hidden play in the game because if Thielen doesn't haul that in on the sideline with an impossible diving juggling grab, then the Vikings punt. They're only up by 3. Getting up by 2 possessions against Arizona was really a dagger because they're just not equipped to come back offensively. Thielen makes that catch. He makes another catch later on to get over the 100-yard plateau, and he finishes it off with a 13-yard touchdown back of the end zone, probably Cousins' best throw of the day. He finishes the game with 123. But whatever separation Thielen is able to get, it's uncanny. 15 targets. No other Viking had more than 5. Diggs had 5. That's a skill. That is a serious skill. And the trust level between Cousins and Thielen is unbelievable. Like, look at that. Think back to that play where Rudolph got hosed on the offensive pass interference call, which was, I think, a pretty bad call. But the throw that Cousins made to Thielen, you don't make that to everybody. Tight window, contested, under duress. That's an ill-advised throw to many people, but to Thielen, who hauled it in for a should-have-been first down, just a microcosm of how much trust there is between the quarterback and Thielen. And next week, he'll go for 7 straight against the Jets in what might be a shootout. New York is putting up some serious points right now, and they'll be back at home. They scored 42 against Indy yesterday. Look out for the Jets. That's not going to be a pushover game. Rookie quarterback, sure, but probably one of the best of the bunch in the rookie quarterback crop. So can the Vikings do what they did last year again? Can they sweep the second quarter of the season? They're 2-0 now. The Jets on the road, and the Saints at home. Packers will try to tie the Vikings with a win tonight, and that could create virtually a 3-way tie at the top of this division, and it's anybody's division right now. Even the Lions still in the mix. Lions are at Miami next week. Bears host New England. Chicago could easily lose again, and Green Bay has a bye. Minnesota could be your division leader this time next week. Plenty of coverage coming your way at zonecoverage.com. Big ACL rehab story relating to Mike Hughes. That's coming up very shortly. And plenty of Jets preview and Cardinals review after open locker room on Monday, and then practice restarting again on Wednesday. Thanks so much for listening. It's the Zone Coverage Football Machine day after reaction show. The Real Deal, Wednesday nights, Andy Carlson, Arif Hassan, Luke Inman, taking your calls and giving you all the best analysis on your Minnesota Vikings. But a victory Monday today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Sam Ekstrom on Twitter, @Sam Ekstrom. Take it easy.